Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a kingdom hidden deep within lush green forests. In this kingdom lived Snow White, known for her legendary beauty. Her beauty was talked about in every corner of the kingdom. Snow White's skin was as white as snow, her hair as black as ebony, and her lips as red as a drop of blood. Her beauty captivated everyone who saw her. She charmed everyone with her beauty. People were mesmerized by her grace and kindness. Snow White was known not only for her outer beauty, but also for her inner beauty. However, her stepmother, the evil queen, was very jealous of Snow White. The queen was obsessed with beauty and couldn't stand the existence of someone more beautiful than herself. Every day she asked her magic mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" The queen eagerly awaited the mirror's answer. For a long time the mirror replied, "You are my queen, you are the fairest one in the land." The queen was pleased with this answer and saw herself as the most beautiful woman in the world. But as time passed, Snow White grew into a young woman. Snow White's beauty increased day by day, and everyone in the kingdom talked about her beauty. The queen realized that Snow White's beauty was overshadowing her own, and this drove her mad. Snow White's beauty fueled the queen's jealousy, and the queen began to look for ways to get rid of Snow White. The queen's heart was filled with hatred for Snow White, and she began to make wicked plans to eliminate her. Snow White, unaware of these dangers, continued to live happily in the forest. One day the mirror gave the queen an answer she never expected. "You are beautiful, my queen, but Snow White is far more beautiful than you." At that moment, the jealousy inside the queen ignited. She decided to get rid of Snow White once and for all. The wicked queen immediately summoned the palace huntsman. She ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and kill her. As proof, she demanded he bring back the girl's heart. The poor huntsman, terrified of the queen's wrath, was forced to promise he would obey. The huntsman took Snow White deep into the forest, but he couldn't bring himself to hurt the innocent Snow White. He told her about the queen's horrible plan and begged her to run away. "Don't look back, princess," said the huntsman. "Never return to the kingdom." Not knowing what to do out of fear, Snow White started running into the depths of the forest, tears streaming down her face. She tripped and fell over tree roots, thorns tearing at her clothes. Finally, exhausted and famished, she came across a small cottage in the middle of the forest. The cottage belonged to 7 dwarfs. This cottage was a small and charming house hidden among the trees in the depths of the forest. The dwarfs were not at home because they were working in the mine. Every day they would get up early in the morning, go to the mine and work until evening. Snow White entered the cottage and looked around. The place was a mess. There were dirty dishes on the table and scattered belongings on the floor. On the small table were 7 plates and 7 spoons. Each one was a different size and shape. The tired princess lay down on one of the dwarfs' beds and immediately fell asleep. Even though the beds looked small and uncomfortable, they were the most comfortable place in the world for Snow White at that moment. When the dwarfs returned home in the evening, they saw Snow White sleeping in their beds. As they entered through the small door, they were astonished by this unexpected sight. At first they were scared, then very surprised. Who was this stranger? Why was she sleeping in their house? Snow White told the dwarfs what had happened to her. She told them that her evil stepmother wanted to kill her and that she had to flee into the forest. The dwarfs decided to help her. They told her that she could hide from the queen with them. They assured Snow White that she would be safe here and could stay with them, as long as she didn't open the door to anyone when she was home alone. The dwarfs warned Snow White to only open the door to them. This way they were sure that the evil queen wouldn't be able to find her. The prince's arrival. A ray of hope illuminates the forest. The sun's rays, filtering through the trees deep within the forest, lit the prince's path. As the prince rode his horse with courage and determination, a ray of hope appeared in every corner of the forest. This light gave hope to all creatures within the dark forest. Meanwhile, the evil queen realized that the heart the huntsman brought her was not real. The queen was filled with rage when she realized the huntsman had tricked her. Deep within the dark forest, the queen's anger grew with each passing moment. When she learned from her magic mirror that Snow White was still alive, she went mad. The images shown by the mirror further fueled the evil within the queen. The fact that Snow White was still alive had ruined the queen's plans. Disguising herself as an old woman, she prepared a poisoned apple. The queen had devised a wicked plan to put Snow White to sleep forever. As she prepared the poisoned apple, she made every move with care and precision. Whoever ate this apple would sleep forever. The poison in the apple would put Snow White into a deep sleep, never to awaken. The evil queen went straight into the forest and finally found the dwarf's cottage. She knocked on the door. The queen, disguised as an old woman, approached the dwarf's cottage with the poisoned apple in her hand. As she knocked on the door, the evil and ambition in her eyes were evident. Snow White, remembering the dwarf's warning, did not open the door. Snow White, heeding the advice the dwarfs had given her, refrained from opening the door. However, the queen's cunning had distracted Snow White, but the queen tricked Snow White into eating the poisoned apple. The queen, with sweet words, deceived Snow White into taking a bite of the apple. As Snow White bit into the apple, the queen's wicked plan came to fruition. The moment she bit into the apple, Snow White collapsed to the ground. The poison from the apple spread rapidly through Snow White's body, sending her into a deep sleep. As Snow White fell, the apple rolled away from her hand. The end of evil. The mirror shatters. The truth is revealed. When the dwarfs returned home, they found Snow White lying motionless on the ground. They learned everything from the queen's mirror. They placed Snow White in a glass coffin and took her to the most beautiful part of the forest. As days turned into weeks, one day a handsome prince, while hunting in the forest, came across the coffin where Snow White lay. The prince was captivated by Snow White's beauty and fell in love with her at first sight. He listened to the dwarfs tell him the princess's story. Then he kissed Snow White on her forehead. And at that moment, Snow White awoke. The spell of the poisoned apple was broken. Goodness always triumphs, tears of joy and songs of victory. Snow White hugged the prince and the dwarfs. She was overjoyed to be free from the queen's wickedness. The prince took Snow White to his own castle and asked her to marry him. Snow White happily accepted his proposal. The entire kingdom was invited to their wedding. But the evil queen also came to the wedding. She was speechless with astonishment when she saw Snow White. The mirror once again declared the princess's beauty to everyone. The queen, succumbing to her rage, collapsed and died right there. Eternal friendship with the dwarfs, bonfires and joyful songs. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, and the 7 dwarfs remained the princess's loyal friends forever. Every weekend, the dwarfs would visit the princess at her castle. They would sing songs together, play games, and have a wonderful time. Despite the hardships she faced, Snow White never gave up on kindness and hope. She never lost her courage and kindness. And that's the end of our story. The end of the tale, love and hope like flowers that never fade. As you can see, good always triumphs over evil. Fear and jealousy are a person's downfall. Love, hope and friendship are the keys to true happiness. Remember, children, after every dark night, a bright morning always dawns, just like in the story of Snow White.